Alright, hey everybody, I'm going to start this Facebook Live in around 1 minute or so. Just want to give folks a chance to kind of get online right now, and we will start answering questions about Jose. And now, Hurricane Maria, which is expected to intensify in the next couple of days. I'll be back in just about 30 seconds or so, okay? Just a couple more seconds. Get your questions ready. Okay, everybody, just wanted to get that shared in a bunch of different places on the CBS 12 page and a couple of different pages out there. So let's talk about Jose and let's talk about Maria now. Obviously, Jose is just kind of lingering off the coast. It's been there for several days. Maria is definitely the one that has the most interest here in the state of Florida, because if you've seen the National Hurricane Center cone, then you know it's generally pointed in our direction. But the thing is, it doesn't quite get to us, obviously, because the National Hurricane Center track only goes out about 5 days or so. We'd be closer to 7 days away from this system, if it even ever comes here. Of course, there's always a chance that it will, but we're going to talk about the different scenarios, the different possibilities, and then I'm going to answer some of your questions. I'm kind of looking at the questions there on the left. So just let me get through a little bit of kind of, where Jose is, where it's moving, where Maria is, where it's moving, and then we'll get to your questions in about 3 minutes or so. All right, so let's first show you Jose. Jose, is a hurricane, and it's in between Bermuda and Hatteras, and this is going to be moving north. Maria has just become a hurricane, and it is expected to intensify. It's located to the east of Barbados, but it's moving west-northwest, so the island of Guadeloupe and Dominica are going to have to watch that very closely. First, let's talk about Jose, being that it's just off the eastern seaboard. Right now, the winds are 90. It's moving north at 9. We don't think this is going to make a direct hit on Cape Cod, but it's going to be coming very close to Cape Cod on Wednesday, probably 100, 200 miles offshore, probably. In that position, it's likely to produce at least tropical storm force wind gusts on Long Island, maybe some parts of the Jersey Shore, especially southeast New England around Nantucket and Cape Cod. And also, depending upon how close it is, it could produce some heavy rain, especially for coastal locations. The biggest threat is going to be the surf, obviously big surf, big waves, and the possibility of coastal flooding. In fact, the probability of coastal flooding in those places that typically flood during nor'easters, because this is a somewhat similar situation to a nor'easter that kind of comes up along the coast but doesn't actually make landfall. And then, the European seems to be the winner again. Looks as though the system's just going to stall and kind of hang out the rest of the week. It won't necessarily ever make landfall, although it'll come close again in places like Cape Cod, and then just kind of linger there for what could be several days after that. This is a quick look at the steering flow for Jose. So we have that Bermuda high to the east, this little jet stream along the coast that should keep it far east of Cape Hatteras. That's great news, although obviously there's going to be big surf. There already is some decent surf along the eastern seaboard. Then the system gets close to, but not quite on top of Cape Cod. That's Wednesday. Notice that jet stream in northern New England, that's going to miss the system. A couple days ago, a lot of the models said it was going to pick the system up and move it to the northeast. Most say it'll probably get stuck now. That's what the Europeans have been saying for literally days and days and days. So the storm is going to stall and linger. So we're not too worried about Jose, although the interesting thing is going to be when Maria gets up to that latitude, whether or not it interacts with Jose. They do not merge. Tropical systems don't merge. However, there could be some type of what we call orbiting. We call it the Fujiwara effect, but essentially they could interplay with each other in some way, shape, or form, but they won't merge. And I've gotten a lot of questions about that because people are always concerned that two hurricanes will become a superstorm, and that's not the case. All right, so let's talk about Maria, and I want to concentrate on the islands before I get to Florida because we all know that the last thing the islands need is another hurricane, and unfortunately, some of the islands will be seeing it, although this time, at least initially, it's going to be further south. And so it's Guadeloupe and Dominica that are under the hurricane warnings up to around St. Kitts. It's Barbuda, which, you know, there's no one living on, unfortunately, anymore, but there is a tropical storm warning in effect for them. So it is going to pass to the south of there. St. Martin right now under a hurricane watch. So we think the system goes a little further, just a little further south initially until it gets towards the U.S. Virgin Islands and eventually towards Puerto Rico where it could make a direct hit, and I'll show you right now. So right now the winds are 75 with Hurricane Maria, moving west-northwest at 15. So it's projected to become a Cat 2 and eventually a Cat 3. So a Cat 2 tomorrow, probably staying at Cat 2 into Tuesday morning, then Tuesday afternoon could become a Cat 3. Some of our models even show it eventually becoming a Cat 4. So this is likely to become a major hurricane. It moves right near Dominica, right near Guadeloupe, just to the south perhaps, or near St. Kitts. And then after that, watch how it probably moves right over or very close to Puerto Rico. And they have it as a strong, essentially Cat 3 with winds of 125. So this is really could be almost more impactful than Irma was to Puerto Rico because it's going to be passing perhaps right over the island. That'll be on Wednesday. And it may be weakened a little bit by that and the interaction with the northern part of the Dominican Republic. This is the position at day 5, right near the Turks and Caicos Islands, again as a Cat 3, so this is another strong system, not quite as strong as Irma was when it was over the Turks and Caicos, but winds around 120 miles an hour. That's it. That's the end of the National Hurricane Center 5-day cone. You notice it goes as far south as the southern coast of Haiti, and it goes as far east and north as way to the east of the Bahamas. But it is headed in the general direction of the Bahamas at that point. However, a lot of our computer models do indicate that it could turn. So let's talk a little bit about the reason why. First, let me show you the computer models. So you can see initially the storm goes across the islands, across Puerto Rico. This is where it ends up by Saturday. As far west as Abaco Island with some of our models, but not our better models. One of the models you see over Abaco Island, that's a Canadian model. Some of our better models are much further east than that. So, you know, the model envelope right now is either over the Turks and Caicos and eastern Bahamas or even east of that. That's what the models say. So let's talk about the steering pattern for Maria, and then I'm going to get to some of your questions, okay? All right, so Maria is being steered by that area high pressure, and it's a pretty firm steering, pretty certain steering through about Wednesday because high pressure is going to be moving it basically right over Puerto Rico, and that's the only thing that will be steering it, and it has pretty good steering. However, once we get into the Thursday, Friday time frame, the steering kind of weakens. It gets into what we call a weakness in between that Bermuda high and this very weak mid-level and upper-level kind of jet stream or dip. It's not even really a jet stream, to be honest with you. It's just some very light steering from the southwest over the Gulf of Mexico, west or southwest over the Gulf of Mexico and Florida. So we think that will be enough, probably, to steer it to the east. But the weakness exists all the way from the eastern Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands all the way to the southeast coast of Florida. So there's a weakness anywhere in there, and the hurricane could really go anywhere in there. But if you look at what's over the state of Florida, which is this little dip in the jet stream, which is not strong enough to make me very confident, but I'm, let's say, mildly confident that this is going to pass to the east of us. That it's possible we may get a little bit more of a scare before then, though. The models may try to trend closer to the Bahamas before they start trending away. But the majority of the models, and it makes sense when looking at it meteorologically, that this will probably stay either over the eastern Bahamas or maybe even just to the east of that. But that's close. And it's close for a storm that by then could actually be a Cat 4 hurricane. It is possible some of our models show it becoming yet another big, intense, major hurricane. And by no means is Florida out of the woods here. Now, after that, and I know some questions are going to pop up about the Carolinas, it's way too early to know because now we're talking 9-10 days out. However, some of the models do veer it off into the ocean and out to sea. That is, some of the models show that. There are some models that show it moving into the Carolinas. Because what happens is that jet stream, that dip that you see across Florida, pivots enough. Instead of kind of blocking the system from getting to the Carolinas, kind of pivots and it pushes the system kind of into the Carolinas. So, you know, it's too early to know. All right, so with that said, just give me a second. I'm going to look at the screen. I'm probably going to go back and forth in answering some of your questions. Okay? All right. So I got a question from Jeez, that's J-E-Z-Z, and he says, do you think Florida is going to get hit? Well, as I just explained, you know, it's too early to know. If you have your shutters on and you don't mind keeping them on, it may be a good idea just to have them on so you don't have to put them back on just in case it decides to take more of a left track. And it's way too early to know because we're still 7 days out, and a lot is going to change. We saw it with Irma. We saw it go back and forth, back and forth. So this will likely go back and forth a little bit. So just to be on the safe side, you may want to keep them up if you have them up. If you don't have them up, don't put them up right now. We have plenty of days to worry about the possibility of it coming here. But as I've stated, I think odds are that this should stay east of us. And again, I'm only mildly confident of that because it still is 7 days out. Okay? I'm looking for a question right now. So Christine asked, should we keep the shutters up? And my answer, I answered that already. Yeah, keep it up if they're up. Somebody asked, and I don't know who it was now, I kind of lost it, asked about the European, which one of those models was the European model. I think I can go backwards and show you. And actually, the European model is not on here. The European, believe it or not, the European agency doesn't allow us to plot the spaghetti models with the rest of the computer models. At least they didn't at one point. But if you look at it, the models that are more pink on the eastern side, they'd be closer to what the European track is. The European track is not quite all the way on the right there, but somewhere in the middle of them. Definitely not as far west as Abaco Island. At least that was the latest European model. Let me see what other questions we have. Magdalena says, hello from Puerto Rico. Hope I didn't butcher your name too much. And you just said hello, so I'll say hello back and say you should be preparing for a Category 3 hurricane at this point in Puerto Rico, because it does look like most of our models, and I'll show you as we go backwards here, I mean, they're basically all either over Puerto Rico or a miss by about that much. So with that said, we're fairly confident that Puerto Rico is going to get hit. Maybe not a direct landfall, but also maybe a direct landfall. So get ready in Puerto Rico. Let's see here. So Deb Sosa says, if it were to hit Florida, when would it hit Florida? If it were to get here, it'd be next weekend. So maybe next Saturday or Sunday. Probably more likely next Sunday. But somewhere around that time frame. If it were to get to Florida, and again, that's a big if. But certainly a possibility. As you know, these models are bound to shift. Hopefully they don't shift closer to us. Okay. Bear with me here, folks. So Selena says, should we keep the shutters up? Yep, might as well keep them up. Why not? Wouldn't hurt to keep them up. So I've gotten a couple of questions. One is from Nabila. She says, she said, when will we know better? I think we'll know better by Tuesday. I really do. I think we'll have a much better handle on it by Tuesday. I think we have a decent handle now. I think we'll have a better handle by Tuesday. So make sure you tune in tomorrow for updates on Tuesday, and we should really have a much better idea by then. Okay? Someone asked, Donna Ashton asked, how big is this compared to Irma? Well, it's smaller than Irma right now, but obviously it's going to be growing over time. It really is just a weak weak hurricane, or a Cat 1 at the moment, but it is expected to strengthen. So it will eventually be a bigger hurricane. Right now it's much smaller. So Lynn Hall is asking about Georgia. I would say if you're anywhere from extreme North Florida up to the Carolinas, this is a storm you want to watch very closely. While we may have a decent handle on what might happen in Florida, and we're not in any way sure about that, we have less of a handle on what's going to happen on the southeast coast because it's further out in the future, and because we don't know how that jet stream I was showing you, and I'll put that jet stream back up for you. Let us get to this. So you see that jet that's in central Florida. Whether or not that's going to protect the east coast of Florida, we're not sure yet. We hope. But at some point when the storm gets further north, there's a chance that that jet could pivot back. And if it does pivot back, it would push the storm closer to the Carolinas. And the models are about split. Some of the models show it kind of veering off to the east, and some show it heading into the southeast coast. So it's certainly too early to know, but I would watch it closely if I were in the Carolinas. And by the way, I know we have the Emmys coming up in around 12 minutes, so we'll take a couple more questions and then we'll call it a day. But I'll be back obviously tomorrow, and I'll be here all week. So Angela says, how long is the jet stream going to be hanging over Florida? Well, I should clarify. I mean, I have it labeled as the jet stream. It's really not a jet stream. It's really just a weak upper-level steering flow. To call it a jet stream is probably a little bit of an exaggeration, to be honest. However, that's how it acts, at least. It'll act as a steering or a jet stream to kind of hopefully steer the storm to the east. But it will be around for, once it gets established, it's going to be around for quite a while. And it's really, really, really weak in the mid-levels. It becomes a little stronger once you get really high in the atmosphere. But the steering of hurricanes is not necessarily controlled by upper-level jet streams. It's controlled by the average wind flow at all levels, and that's why I say this is a really weak signal and one that we can't count on to block the storm, one that we're hoping will help block the storm. And it's a strong enough signal to make me cautiously optimistic, but definitely it's not a definite at this point. Wendy says, when you live in Florida, you should always be prepared. Thank you, Wendy Johnson. Carol says the grocery stores are empty. So one of the questions was a good question, which is how do the spaghetti plots compare to the way Irma was at this point? Now, it's hard for me to remember, but I do remember that Irma was pointed more clearly at Florida on the spaghetti plots than this is. This is, first of all the models are further east, a little bit further east at least. Some of the models were this far east with Irma. However, the European model was definitely much more troubling in terms of its prediction for Irma at 7 days, which we'd be 7 days out now, than it is for Maria. The European model is showing a track that's further east right now. And I have to tell you, the European model was great with Jose so far. The European model for days now has been showing the storm Jose getting up to around Cape Cod. And all the models have been good in some way, shape, or form, but the one thing that the Europeans have been really good with Jose is that it's been stalling it off Cape Cod and just kind of keeping it there and making it do a loop. So, judging by how well the European did with Irma, it did better than the other models. Judging by how well it seems to be doing with Jose, and we don't know yet because Jose has yet to do that move to Cape Cod and stall out, but the other models are now kind of leaning towards that. We have to bet that the European would probably be the better model for Maria as well, and so it does make sense. And so in this case, Irma was almost pointed directly at South Florida 7 days out by the European, but Maria is not, and that's an encouraging sign. David Schnell says Florida can't handle another storm. I would say I can't handle another storm. I'd really like there not to be another storm. So Danielle says, what is the Fujiwara that people keep asking about? Well, it's a fancy name for orbiting. So when two tropical cyclones get close to each other, they feel each other. They won't merge. And there's a good reason for that, because on the outside of these tropical systems, you have a tremendous amount of sinking air. We call it subsidence. There's so much sinking air on the outsides of these hurricanes, they can actually feel each other when they get too close, and they'll repel each other, or actually orbit around each other, almost like two planets. So Fujiwara is just a fancy name for orbiting. And if they get close to each other, there is the chance that one may try to slingshot the other one, or they may slingshot each other. And that's something the Europeans showed yesterday. It doesn't quite show it today, or at least last time I checked it didn't. But it's something that could happen if Jose is still there and it still is a player. There's a good chance that by the time Maria gets up to that latitude where Jose is, that Jose will be kind of almost done. It will almost be dissipating by that point. Because, by the way, for folks watching from North Carolina north, there's a point at which the warm water just completely stops. You can see where the water gets too cold for Jose to support itself. That's why it goes from what is a borderline Cat 1, Cat 2 hurricane, and all of a sudden weakens to a tropical storm off New England. It's because water temperatures drop rapidly once you get south of Long Island, north of New Jersey, and south of Cape Cod. Anyway, just to let you know why Jose, even if it does kind of linger off New England for days, is likely to weaken. Noah says, is it going to Grand Bahama? Grand Bahama is obviously one of the closer islands to West Palm Beach. It is where Freeport is. And at this point, most of the computer models predict it will be east of that. I've seen a couple of computer models predict that it could be near Marsh Harbor, Abaco Island, Hopetown. Most of them are even east of that. I would be watching very closely if I were in the Turks and Caicos or the southeast Bahamas. I'd be a little less worried the further west I was. But again, remember that it's still 6-7 days out, and it's still too hard for us to predict. So Jen Showalter says, any talk about the Gulf disturbance? You know, it is interesting, and about 10 days from now, I've seen a couple of models try to develop something, in the Caribbean or Gulf. You know what? I'm not even going to worry about that yet. Obviously I'm watching it, but I'm a lot more concerned about Maria. We have to get through the next couple of days. I mean, the Virgin Islands, all those islands have been decimated at this point. The last thing they need is a major hurricane. So we have to watch that, and obviously Puerto Rico very closely, because we think it's going to be a near direct hit on Wednesday in Puerto Rico. We'll worry about the Gulf disturbance and Caribbean disturbance when we get a little closer. But I am watching it. I have noticed it, and obviously we would just like this hurricane season to be over. I mean, it felt just a teeny bit cooler in South Florida today. I'm sure you would agree. Not much cooler, maybe a degree or two. Gerald says, leave the FPL crews here. We need them. David says, thank you. Thank you, David, for watching. Paul says, is it good to surf in the middle of a Cat 5? Paul, I don't think that's a good idea. All right, so everyone, listen, I see that there's hundreds and hundreds of questions and comments. I appreciate them all. It's 7:55. I know a lot of you want to watch the Emmys now, so I'll let you do that. I'll be on the 11 o'clock show tonight. I'll have all the latest information there, and then I'll be back tomorrow and the rest of the week, and we will be doing regular Facebook Lives. I'm sure we'll do them in the morning. I know we'll do one during the afternoon and evening, so we'll probably do at least 3 of them a day. All right, everybody, have a great night. Make sure you pay close attention to what's going on. I'll leave you with this one thing. If you're just joining us, just leave the shutters on in case, if you can. I mean, if you're, I understand that they're not the best because the house is all dark and they don't allow the air to circulate. So if you need to take the shutters off, go ahead. If you're okay with leaving them on, you might as well, just in case. As it stands right now, again, I am mildly, very cautiously optimistic that this could pass east of us. However, I will tell you it's way too early, and I know that there's going to be shifts over the next couple of days. And I'm really most concerned about the strength of that jet stream. Right now it is really weak. That what I call a jet stream is really just steering, and it's really weak steering. So if it gets any weaker, then it puts us in somewhat of a dilemma here in Florida. But for right now, that corridor is most open right over the eastern Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands, not so much as open in Florida. Again, we'll see what happens there. And then after that, again, it's the southeast coast we need to watch. Okay, everybody, I am going to leave you for now, but have a great night. Enjoy the Emmys, and I'll see you later at 11 o'clock tonight.